Brazil, political parties define alliances ahead of the second round of the presidential election to be held on October 30th. The South Korean and the U.S. militaries fired surface-to-surface missiles in response to North Korea's latest ballistic missile test. And the Russian President Vladimir Putin signed the confirmation of the documents on the incorporation into Russian territory of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, as well as the regions of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Brazil, political parties defined alliances ahead of the second round of the presidential elections to be held on October the 30th. The Democratic Labour Party confirmed the formalization of its support to the candidate for the Workers' Party, Lula da Silva, in the second round of the elections. For his part, the presidential candidate of the Democratic Labour Party, Ciro Gomes, during his participation in the meeting with party leaders, also manifested his support to Lula da Silva. 4 governors-elect also expressed their support to the candidate for the Workers' Party. This, while Jair Bolsonaro's candidacy received the support and the enhancement of the re-elected governors in Rio de Janeiro and the governor of Minas Gerais, Romeu Zema, for the second round of the election. It is important to stress that these alliances do not grant more votes for any candidate, but rather a political support for other forces with similar governing programs. On Tuesday, the Mexican Senate passed a bill allowing the Army to continue its citizen security and crime-fighting duties until 2028. The Senate approved the measure with 87 votes in favor and 40 against, mostly from the National Action Party and the Citizen Movement. Among the control mechanisms, the bill establishes that the federal government must present a biannual report on the work of the Army and Navy in public security. It also provided for the creation of a bicameral commission to oversee the performance of the military forces and to summon high-ranking officials to appear before it. The Colombian government recently announced it will slowly increase the price of gasoline and reduce the fuel subsidies. According to Finance Minister José Antonio Campo, the decision came as the country needs to lower the deficit. Colombia has had some of the cheapest fuel in the region, only behind Venezuela and Bolivia. The price of gasoline will begin to rise gradually this month. The current rate is equivalent to a little more than $2 per gallon. The government said the initial increase will be about 200 pesos, or about 4 cents a gallon.
It took so long to raise the price because we were in an election season, and it was seen as unviable for the government in power. It would have been an unpopular action. The financial deficit we are generating because of the subsidies are huge. Yet, considering the rise in inflation that we're going through internationally and especially in Colombia, this year, unfortunately, the price of diesel might go up.
On Wednesday in Ecuador, security authorities appeared before Parliament to provide a report of the latest prison riot in which 16 inmates were killed. The Interior Minister, Juan Zapata, the Director of the National Service of Integral Attention to Persons Deprived of Liberty, Bolívar Garzón, and the General Commander of the Police, Fausto Salinas, should present a report on the violent events in the Latacunga prison in the province of Cotopaxi that accounts as the 8th prison riot since February 2021. According to official data, in addition to the fatalities, 43 inmates were wounded. In Uruguay, high school teachers and pupils joined a strike by university professors and students who are demanding a higher education budget. The National University Professors Association considers the increase announced by the Senate to be insufficient, and it says the budget increase granted so far neglects important areas of growth for the institution. In this regard, the university movement summoned all the faculties to carry out a mobilization in the vicinity of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security this Wednesday in defense of the university's budget, for an improvement of study conditions and for an increase in the professors' salaries. Now we move on to other topics. Minority ethnic groups in the United States with less access to top medical care may end up suffering more from the lingering effects of long COVID than the overall population. According to an expert from the City University of New York, warned that the virus will also bring increased inequality. While the world has slowly sought to get back on its feet after the shock of the coronavirus pandemic, many are still suffering from the effects of long COVID. It is a set of symptoms that developed after the initial period of illness and can last months and even years. There are no specific treatments available for long COVID, meaning it is often a matter of managing the symptoms. Experts advise to focus on vitamin C-rich foods and taking holistic approaches to each person's physical and mental well-being when dealing with these effects. We'll take a short break now, but first, remember you can now follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. We have other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. The South Korean and the U.S. militaries fired surface-to-surface missiles early Wednesday morning in response to North Korea's latest ballistic missile test. The South Korea Defense Ministry said the military launched a total of 4 tactical missiles into the sea. According to the official, the live-fire drill was aimed at demonstrating precision strike capabilities against North Korea. Meanwhile, the authorities acknowledged the failure of a ballistic missile at the time of the firing, which caused a large fire, although no casualties were reported, according to the South Korean state agency Yonhap. The South Korean military announced on Wednesday that the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier will return to East Sea waters in response to the ballistic missile launched by North Korea on Tuesday. In the same area, the Ronald Reagan and Strike Group, consisting of the USS Chancellorsville missile cruiser and the Aegis-equipped destroyer USS Barry, conducted 4 days of exercises with the South Korean and Japanese Navy until last Friday. This redeployment of an aircraft and its strike group to the Korean Peninsula is highly unusual. The South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff explained in a statement and said the action shows the determination of the alliance between the Republic of Korea and the United States to respond decisively to the threats. Thousands of Hungarian teachers and students demonstrated against the government in Budapest. Teachers and their supporters protested against low wages, increasingly heavy particular demands on students, poor conditions, and the lack of freedom of lesson planning. At the mobilizations, they formed a human chain across downtown Budapest and the Danube River. The process of centralization in the country's education system means that curriculum, textbooks, and decision-making are all controlled by one central body formed in 2012 by Hungary's nationalist government. Following a series of unsuccessful talks with the government on increasing wages and reducing hours, unions have called on the teachers to make a series of strikes and work stoppages. In Afghanistan, a Taliban spokesperson reported on Wednesday an explosion at a mosque in Kabul, near the office of the Ministry of Interior. There is still no official report on the blast, and an investigation is underway. A full year after the Taliban takeover, there has been a surge in bombings, like the one registered last Friday at a girls' education center in West Kabul, in an area mostly populated by the Hazara minority. Among the 53 victims, there were 46 girls and young women. Following the explosion, Hazara women, dressed in black, staged a protest on Saturday, chanting slogans against the genocide of minorities and demanded their rights to be observed. And the Palestinian government demanded help from the international community for Israel to stop the siege and the terrorism practiced by the occupation forces. Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian representative to the United Nations, demanded a stop to the terrorist practices by the occupying forces and their settlers, and to provide international protection to the Palestinian people. Mansour pointed out that what is most dangerous is the terrorism that targets the rights of a people and the systematic attacks they suffer with impunity. The diplomat also said that the strategy of the United Nations must be based on combating terrorism and strengthening the rule of law. The Syrian armed forces held military exercises with live ammunition to commemorate their victory in the 1973 war against the Israeli regime. Following guidelines from the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, President Bashar al-Assad, a formation of the Syrian army carried out several days of tactical exercises as part of this year's fighting programs. In the drills, the ground and air forces fought in conditions that simulate a real battlefield. This activity received the approval of Abdul Karim Mahmoud Ibrahim, the chief of the general staff, who described this as the utmost importance to strengthen the combat experience of the military, who have been fighting the scourge of terrorism for more than 10 years. The Tibar Bay port, contracted by a Chinese company, will play an important role in promoting Timor-Leste's comprehensive development and serve as another cornerstone for the country's 20-year development plan. Located in the capital city of Dili, the Tibar Bay port, one of the projects under China's Belt and Road Initiative, is Timor-Leste's first modern container terminal. Its construction is the largest infrastructure investment project since the founding of the country. A few years ago, the government of the Asian nation decided to build a modern container port to enhance the shipping capacity of the capital city. After the Tibar Bay port is put into operation, the country is expected to see a growing maritime transport capacity and benefit from exports, especially of its gas. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed on Wednesday the confirmation of the documents on the incorporation into Russian territory of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic, as well as the regions of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. In previous days, both houses of parliament unanimously ratified the inclusion treaties of the 4 new regions into the country. Under the treaties, the borders of the new Russian territories are determined by the borders that existed on the day of their formation and integration into the Russian Federation. Starting from the date of incorporation into Russia, there will be 2 republics and 2 regions. They will retain their current names, and their leaders will receive the status of governors. The treaty also establishes that the integration will take place in a transitional period up to 2026. The Organization of Oil Exporting Countries, OPEC and OPEC Plus, will hold a meeting on Wednesday to agree upon a cut in crude oil production. Oil prices rose again on Tuesday due to the prospect of a production cut by OPEC and OPEC Plus allies and the dollar's decline. The organization, which includes Saudi Arabia and Russia, plans cuts of between 1 and 2 million barrels of oil per day, which could spur a price recovery. The price of a barrel of crude oil has fallen to around $90, whereas 3 months ago it stood at $120 due to fears of a global economic recession, rising interest rates in the United States, and the strength of the US dollar. Now we move on to other topics. A new tropical wave is in formation, and it threatens to affect Central America and the Caribbean in the coming days. The National Hurricane Center has issued several warnings for the countries in the region due to the new tropical wave that is forming in the waters north of Venezuela. Meteorological authorities said that the phenomenon has a 60% probability of becoming a storm or a tropical depression in the next 48 hours if the system remains over open waters. They also said that if it were to become a tropical depression, it will be named Julia. In Somalia, drought and famine were responsible for the deaths of thousands of people, including nearly 900 children under the age of 5 who are being treated for malnutrition, according to the UN. The critical situation in Africa's Horn could be considered catastrophic. The UN warned that 500,000 children are at risk of death due to the lack of food and waterborne diseases such as cholera. The fifth season of drought has left herders and farmers unable to sustain their communities. The plight is exacerbated by the lack of aid, the presence of Islamic extremist groups, and the impact of the conflict in Ukraine.
What's happening to us is severe drought and political instability. Since we lost all our livestock and the land is barren and no means employment, we are appealing to the international NGOs to assist with shelter, food, and water to drink.
As well as Somalia, North Kenya faced famine amid worsening drought, and according to the UN, 1.1 million of people are affected. UNICEF has also pronounced about the topic and said that at least 900,000 children require treatment to severe malnutrition.
The fourth drought, one of the worst drought experience in 4 decades. It has taken almost most of the countries in the Horn of Africa, with the one standing out in terms of severe impact are the Somali region of Ethiopia, Somalia as a country, and also this northern part of Kenya.
On Wednesday, Thai authorities issued an alert for the high possibility of flooding in Bangkok and central areas due to forecasts of heavy seasonal rains expected during the rest of the week. The situation is exacerbated by the large volume of water coming down from flooding in the north of the country and the spills from overflowing dams. Authorities said that to cope with the situation, they used sandbags to fence off riverbanks, prepared water pumps in drainage tunnels, and had military trucks on standby to transport passengers. Bangkok has already suffered flooding since Monday after torrential rains in the city. In addition, many areas were already inundated by seasonal monsoon rains.
If traveling to and from work becomes difficult, we will ask companies and agencies to be flexible about their working hours, or, if possible, considering working from home to help reduce congestion on roads.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.